bit of an uphill battle here for the coalition?
Well, look, as they say, there's lies, damn lies, and then there's statistics. And certainly I appreciate we have to look at those polls, but you don't get too reactive to polls. I was a former newspaper editor, and honestly, when people rang up and complained about if they didn't like something on the front page, well, I'd always say, well, there's going to be another paper tomorrow. You might like it better. The poll sample was 3,774 people. 18.1 million Australians are enrolled to vote at the moment. So it's a very, very minuscule percentage. Honestly, Holly, if you watch polls and listen to polls and thought the polls were everything, we would have had the voice in by now. The polls so often get it wrong. And yes, we have to be mindful that we always have to be better, that we always have to respond to the electorate. But I don't take too much countenance in polling. I really don't. And if you want a stat, well, Labor at the last election, 34.5% of the vote, 77 seats. We lost government in 2022 on the back of a 35.7% primary vote. So, yeah, I mean, statistics are one thing. Getting out, listening to the electorate and making sure you respond to their needs and wants and expectations and demands, that's what the coalition will be doing over summer. That's what we'll certainly be doing when we go back to Parliament.
Alrighty, and I note that too, what you're saying. You know, polls are not everything to go by, but when you're reflecting on the coalition, why do you think people aren't supporting the coalition? Where do you think the party is falling short?
Well, I don't think Susan Lee's been given clear air by anybody, by the media, even people in her own party. I think she needs some clear air. I think she's been very, very strong during this time of tragedy, time of mourning in Australia, whereas I have to say senior members of the government have not. And as you quite correctly point out, that polling wasn't and didn't include the time of tragedy that we've just endured as a nation. And I think if people were asked today how they felt the government was performing, I think the result would be a lot different, because I don't think the government has responded as well as it should have. I don't think the government has done the right thing for 2 years, let alone in its response to the tragedy, to rein in the anti-Semitism that is spreading like a cancer across our nation. And law-abiding farmers are absolutely livid at the fact that they've been asked then to bear the brunt of, you know, the blame, so to speak, giving up their guns when they desperately need them for their livelihoods, to rid their farm of feral pests. And then you've got recreational shooters, of whom there are many across Australia. And I think that in itself shows that this is a government which is not listening to the people. Anti-Semitism and is the problem. And, you know, law-abiding farmers aren't killing people. Murderous people with evil intent in their hearts, terrorists, killed the people on Bondi Beach. And regional people shouldn't be made to be accountable in the wash-up of what has been a dreadful national tragedy, which the government has not responded accordingly to.
The main thing that has been standing out to me throughout all of this, and, you know, without getting too political, it's the issue of extremism that is being allowed to fester in our country. And we're not really hearing that in the press conferences from the Prime Minister, how exactly he plans to stamp out this extremism that is living in our country. And that's the concern from, you know, your everyday Australians. A lot of conversations I'm having with people, that's the main concern for them. Yes, there were obviously clear failures, but moving forward, how do we stamp out this extremism? I mean, the Prime Minister is also, of course, as you know, resisting calls for a royal commission into the worst terror attack on Australian soil. But I'll just note, Michael, as well, a Melbourne rabbi's car has been targeted. What's your response to this?
Oh, it's disgraceful and it's disgusting. And thankfully, Police Commissioner in New South Wales, Mal Lanyon, has put a 2-week ban on protests, particularly these pro-Hamas protests, which have been allowed to continue despite the abject pushback by the Premier, Chris Minns, by the police commissioner. The police commissioner before Mal Lanyon also said no. And yet, and despite the fact that we've also got a very tired and weary police force, and it costs taxpayers a lot of money, these protests have been allowed to continue. And it's just not right. When the Premier and the police say no to a protest, the likes of Josh Lees and should not be listened to. They just should not, because what we've seen at those protests is hate symbols, ISIS and Al-Qaeda flags. What we've seen is hate speech should not be allowed to continue in Australia. And then the police have been having to go out time and again, over time, for officers to be called in. And I know this for a fact, and everybody in Sydney knows it. And yet it's not just in Sydney, it's in regional areas as well, that we've seen this hate speech being allowed to continue. The judiciary, Justice Belinda Rigg, allowed that August 3 Sydney Harbour Bridge protest to proceed despite the protestations of our community leaders and of the police. Now, this is not right, and this has to stop, and it has to stop now. There's no good that's going to come of these protests. We've already given, as a nation, unfortunately, statehood. We voted for that, the United Nations, to give Palestine statehood. And there is a connection. There absolutely is a connection between the hate speech and what happened at Bondi. And anybody who thinks that there isn't, either is just not reading the room, or quite frankly are in the ALP or the ABC.
One thing that's concerning me is how people are being radicalised here in Australia, and that to me seems to be the core of the issue here. Quickly, we've got to wrap things up. We've run out of time, but does the coalition need to take a more hardline stance on issues like immigration, like One Nation, for example?
Well, yes, and we've been importing 1,221 people a day, and we imported 3,000 Gazans. Tony Burke rushed out to the airport to greet them and for a photo op. Now, have they all had the property security vetting? I don't think so. Yes, we do need to take a good long hard look at immigration. We had a migration policy review. We've delayed that appropriately and sensibly and compassionately because of the Bondi terrorism incident. But we will have more to say about that certainly early in the new year. I know that Susan Lee has been working that up with Andrew Wallace, with Julian Lisa and others. And that's an important position for us to take, and we will indeed have more to say about that in 2026.
Michael McCormack, thank you as always for your contribution on Sky News throughout the year. It's been a pretty heavy and chaotic year, to say the least, but wishing you and your family all the very best and a happy and safe new year.
You too, and your viewers. Thank you.